The knock on my apartment door came like a thunderclap, shattering the quiet of that humid Brooklyn night. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs, because no one ever knocked at 11 p.m. In my world, especially not Pastor Ezekiel Monroe. I was 25, a graphic designer scraping by in a fifth-floor walk-up, and Javier, my boyfriend of 6 months, was sprawled on my couch, his dark curls catching the glow of a single lamp. We'd been laughing about some dumb reality show, our hands brushing, when that knock changed everything. I opened the door, and there stood Pastor Ezekiel, 6 feet of judgment in a crisp black suit, his Bible clutched like a weapon. His eyes, sharp as broken glass, flicked past me to Javier. "Elliot," he said, voice low and heavy. "We need to talk. Now." I'd grown up under Ezekiel's sermons in a small Ohio church, where his words about sin and salvation burned into my soul. My family, devout, unyielding, still lived there, tethered to his every word. I'd fled to New York to escape that suffocating dogma, to find myself, to love freely. But now, here he was, in my safe haven, his presence a violation I couldn't process. Javier sat up, his easy smile gone, replaced by a wary edge. "Who's this, El?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with caution. "Pastor Ezekiel," I said, my throat dry. "From back home." I didn't invite him in, but he stepped forward anyway, his polished shoes clicking on my scuffed hardwood floor. The air thickened, like the moment before a storm breaks. He didn't sit, didn't soften. He just stood there, looming, his gaze pinning me like a butterfly to a board. "Your mother called me," he said. "She's worried about your soul, Elliot. She heard things. About you. About him." His eyes cut to Javier, who stiffened but didn't look away. Javier, 27, was a bartender with a laugh that could light up a room and a past he didn't talk about much: foster homes, street fights, a life of scraping by until he landed in Brooklyn. Same as me. We'd met at a dive bar where he poured me a whiskey and a smile, and something in me clicked, like a key turning in a lock. He was my first real love, the kind that made me believe I could be whole. But now, with Ezekiel in my living room, that love felt like a crime. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ezekiel's lips tightened, and he set his Bible on my coffee table with a deliberate thud. "I'm here to save you, Elliot, from this sin." He gestured at Javier, who let out a sharp laugh, bitter and defiant. "Sin," Javier said, standing now, his 5 feet 10 inches frame taut with anger. "You don't even know me, man." "I know enough," Ezekiel snapped. "I know what this lifestyle does. It destroys families, communities, souls. Elliot, you were raised better than this." His words hit like punches, each one dredging up memories of church pews, whispered gossip, and my mother's tearful prayers. I wanted to scream, to shove him out, but my feet were rooted to the floor. Javier stepped closer, his shoulder brushing mine, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. But I was terrified of what Ezekiel knew, what he'd say, what he'd do. He opened his Bible, flipping to a marked page. Leviticus 18 verse 22. He began, but Javier cut him off. "Save it, preacher. We don't need your verses." Ezekiel's face reddened, but he pressed on, his voice rising. "You're leading him astray, boy. You're dragging him to hell." I flinched, the old fear clawing at meth, fear that maybe he was right. Maybe I was broken. Javier's hand found mine, squeezing hard, grounding me. "Elliot's not your project," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out." Ezekiel didn't move. Instead, he turned to me, his eyes softening just enough to twist the knife. "Your mother begged me to come. She's praying for you, Elliot. She thinks you're lost." My chest tightened. My mother, who'd kissed my forehead every Sunday, who'd cried when I left for New York, who'd never met Javier because I knew she'd never accept him. I hadn't told her about us, but someone had. Small towns talk, and secrets don't stay buried. Elliot, Ezekiel said, stepping closer. Come back with me. We can fix this. You can be whole again. His words were a siren call to the boy I used to be. The one who'd knelt at altars and begged for forgiveness for feelings he didn't understand. But I wasn't that boy anymore. I looked at Javier's fierce eyes, his steady hand in mine, and I felt something stronger than fear. I felt love. I'm not broken, I said, my voice shaking but clear. And I'm not going anywhere. Ezekiel's face hardened, and he picked up his Bible, clutching it to his chest. You're choosing this path, he said. You'll regret it. He turned to leave, but not before dropping a folded piece of paper on my table. Your mother's number. Call her, before it's too late. The door slammed behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. Javier pulled me into his arms, his warmth chasing away the chill Ezekiel left behind. You okay? He whispered. I wasn't, but I nodded, burying my face in his shoulder. The paper sat on the table, a ticking bomb. I didn't know then that Ezekiel's visit was just the beginning, that the ripples of that night would test everything me love. My faith, my courage in ways I never imagined. The folded paper haunted me for days, sitting untouched on my coffee table like a ghost. Javier wanted to burn it, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it, let alone destroy it. Every time I passed it, I saw my mother's face, her soft gray eyes, her trembling hands clasped in prayer, her voice whispering, Elliot, why can't you just be good? I tried to push it out of my mind. Javier and I went back to our routine at night talks, shared coffees, stolen kisses in the stairwell. But Ezekiel's visit had cracked something open, letting doubt seep in. I started noticing things, the way Javier's jaw tightened when I mentioned my family, the way I hesitated before holding his hand in public. Brooklyn was supposed to be my freedom, but now it felt like a stage where I was playing a role I didn't fully believe in. One night, Javier caught me staring at the paper. El, you gotta deal with it, he said, his voice gentle but firm. He was chopping onions for dinner, his knife moving with the easy rhythm of someone who'd worked in kitchens too long. Call her, or don't, but don't let it eat you alive. I wanted to tell him it wasn't that simple, that calling my mother meant facing a woman who'd rather see me alone than with him. But I just nodded, grabbing a beer from the fridge to avoid his eyes. The next day, I was sketching logos for a client when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Elliot, it's Sarah from church. Pastor Ezekiel told us to pray for you. Please come home. My stomach dropped. Sarah, my high school friend, who'd once braided my sister's hair and sung hymns with me. Now she was part of Ezekiel's crusade. I didn't respond, but the texts kept coming, different names. Same message. We miss you. God can heal you. Don't turn your back on us. I showed Javier the text that night, my hand shaking. He read them silently, then tossed my phone onto the couch. They're scared of you living your truth, he said, pulling me close. Don't let them win. But it wasn't that easy. Each message was a thread pulling me back to Ohio, to a life where I'd suffocated under expectations. I loved Javier, but I also loved my family, and the idea of losing them forever felt like a blade in my chest. A week later, I caved. I called my mother. The phone rang 3 times before her voice came through, soft and hesitant. Elliot, is that you? I could hear the creak of her rocking chair, the one she'd sat in while reading me bedtime stories. Yeah, Mom, I said, my throat tight. It's me. She didn't ask about Javier, didn't mention Ezekiel. Instead, she talked about mundane things, her garden, the church bake sale, my sister's new job. But then her voice cracked. Elliot, why don't you come home? Just for a visit. We can talk. I knew what talk meant. It meant interventions, prayers, Maybe even a conversion camp. I'd heard stories from others in the city, kids shipped off to be fixed, coming back hollow. I can't. Mom, I said. I'm happy here. Happy, she said, and the word was sharp, accusing. With that boy. Elliot, that's not God's plan for you. I wanted to yell, to tell her God didn't care who I loved, but the word stuck. Instead, I said, I love you, Mom, and hung up, my hands trembling so badly I dropped the phone. Javier found me later, curled up on the bed, staring at the ceiling. He didn't say anything, just lay beside me, his hand resting on my chest. You don't have to fight this alone, he whispered. I turned to him, his dark eyes steady, and for a moment, I believed him. But deep down, I knew the fight was just beginning. The next morning, I woke to an email from my sister. Clara. Elliot. Mom's sick. She didn't want me to tell you, but it's bad. Come home. My heart stopped. Clara wasn't like the others, she'd always been my ally. The one who'd sneak me comic books when Mom banned them. If she was reaching out, it was real. I showed Javier the email, expecting him to tell me to stay, to fight. Instead, he said, Go. She's your mom. I'll be here when you get back. I booked a bus ticket to Ohio, my mind a tangle of fear and guilt. As I packed, Javier watched me, his usual confidence replaced by something softer, sadder. You're coming back, right? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I kissed him, hard, promising I would. But as the bus pulled out of Port Authority, the city skyline fading behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was heading into a trap. Ohio smelled like damp earth and regret. The bus dropped me off in my hometown of Millfield, a speck of a place where everyone knew your sins before you did. Clara met me at the station, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. It's cancer, she said. No preamble. Lung. Stage 3. The words hit like a freight train. My mother, the woman who'd ironed my church clothes and prayed over every meal, was dying. We drove to the house in silence, the familiar streets a blur of faded storefronts and sagging porches. When I walked through the door, the smell of lavender and old books hit me, dragging me back to childhood. My mother was in her recliner, thinner than I remembered, an oxygen tube looped under her nose. Elliot, she whispered, reaching for me. I knelt beside her, my throat burning. I'm here, Mom. For 2 days, we tiptoed around the truth. I helped Clara cook, sat with Mom during her naps, avoided talk of New York. But on the third night, Pastor Ezekiel showed up again, uninvited, his Bible tucked under his arm. Clara let him in, her face tight with resignation. He's been here every day, she whispered. Says it's for Mom's soul. Ezekiel didn't waste time. Elliot, your mother's illness is a sign, he said, his voice booming in the quiet living room. God's calling you back to righteousness. I stared at him, anger bubbling up. She's sick, not cursed. I snapped. My mother stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Elliot, listen to him, she said, her voice weak but firm. He's trying to help. I wanted to scream that his help was poison, that his words were tearing me apart. But I saw the fear in her eyes, not just for herself, but for me. She believed Ezekiel, believed I was damned. I excused myself, stepping onto the porch, the night air cool against my burning skin. Clara followed, lighting a cigarette, a habit she'd hidden from Mom. She's scared. Elle, she said. She thinks if you don't change, she'll lose you forever. Lose me, I said, my voice breaking. She's pushing me away. Clara sighed, exhaling smoke. She loves you. She just doesn't get it. I wanted to believe her, but the weight of Ezekiel's presence, of my mother's pleas, was crushing me. The next day, I called Javier. His voice was a lifeline. warm and steady. How's it going? L. He asked. I told him everything, Mom's illness, Ezekiel's ambush, the guilt gnawing at me. He listened, then said, You're stronger than you think. Don't let them break you. I clung to his words. But when I hung up, the doubt crept back. Was I strong enough? Or was I betraying everyone, Javier? My mother? Myself? That night, Ezekiel cornered me in the kitchen. Your mother doesn't have long, he said, his voice low, almost gentle. She wants to see you saved before she goes. There's a retreat this weekend. A place where you can be healed. I knew what he meant, a conversion camp. The kind that promised to fix people like me. My stomach churned. No, I said, my voice steady for the first time. I'm not going. His eyes narrowed. You're choosing him over her, he said, and it wasn't a question. I didn't answer, but my silence was enough. He left without another word. But the next morning, I found a pamphlet slipped under my door. Path to Purity, a retreat for the lost. I tore it up, but the words lingered, each one a dagger. When I sat with my mother that afternoon, she took my hand, her grip weak but desperate. Elliot, I just want you to be safe, she said, tears in her eyes. Safe from what? I asked, my voice cracking. From God's judgment, she whispered. I wanted to tell her I was safe with Javier, that love wasn't a sin, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed her forehead and promised to stay a little longer. Back in Brooklyn, Javier was waiting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying him by staying in Ohio. Every night, I texted him updates, Mom's doctor visits, Clara's quiet support, Ezekiel's relentless pressure. His replies were short but steady. I'm here. Love you. They kept me grounded, but the guilt was a tide, pulling me under. One evening, Clara dragged me to a diner, the kind with sticky tables and coffee that tasted like regret. You can't keep doing this, Elle, she said, picking at her fries. You're tearing yourself apart. I stared at my untouched burger, the weight of her words sinking in. I don't know how to fix it, I admitted. Mom's dying, and she thinks I'm wrong. Clara reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. She's wrong about that, but she's still Mom. You gotta find a way to love her without losing yourself. Her words hit hard, but they also sparked something hope. Maybe that I could bridge the gap between who I was and who she wanted me to be. The next day, I found my mother sorting through old photos, her hands trembling. She held up one of me at 8, gap-toothed and grinning at a church picnic. You were so happy then, she said, her voice wistful. I sat beside her, my heart aching. I'm happy now, Mom, I said. With Javier. Her face tightened, but she didn't pull away. Tell me about him, she said, and it was the first time she'd asked. I hesitated, then let the words spill out. How Javier made me laugh. How he danced to bad pop songs in our kitchen. How he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She listened, her eyes distant but soft. When I finished, she said, he sounds kind. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. Ezekiel didn't give up. He showed up the next day with a woman named Deborah, who ran the Path to Purity retreat. She was all smiles, but her eyes were cold, calculating. We can help you, Elliot, she said, handing me a brochure. You can be free. I wanted to laugh, to tell her I was already free, but my mother's hopeful gaze stopped me. I'll think about it, I lied, just to get them out. That night, I called Javier again, my voice breaking as I told him about Deborah, about the retreat, about my mother's fragile hope. They're trying to erase me, I said, tears streaming down my face. Javier was quiet for a long moment, then said, Come home, Elle. We'll figure it out together. I wanted to, desperately, but I couldn't leave, not yet. The next morning, Clara drove me to the hospital for Mom's chemo. As we sat in the waiting room, She handed me a letter, her handwriting shaky. "Mom wrote this for you," she said. I opened it, my heart pounding. It was short, just a few lines. "Elliot, I love you. I don't understand your life, but I want you to be happy. Please don't hate me." I cried then, right there in the sterile waiting room, because it was the closest she'd ever come to acceptance. When we got back, Ezekiel was waiting. "Your mother's letter doesn't change the truth," he said, his voice hard. "You're living in sin." I'd had enough. "Get out," I said, my voice steady. "You don't get to decide my truth." He left, but not before warning me, "You'll lose her if you keep this up." His words echoed as I sat by my mother's side that night, watching her sleep, wondering if he was right. I stayed in Ohio another week, balancing between hope and heartbreak. My mother's condition stabilized, but her words, her letter kept me tethered to her, even as Ezekiel's shadow loomed. I knew I had to go back to Javier, to the life we'd built, but leaving felt like abandoning her. One night, Clara and I sat on the porch, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. "You love him, don't you?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, my throat tight. "Then go be with him," she said. "Mom's tough. She'll come around." I wanted to believe her, but the fear of losing my mother, off losing everything, clung to me. The next day, I sat with Mom, holding her hand. "I'm going back to New York," I said, my voice steady. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Be safe, Elliot," she said, and for the first time, I felt like she meant it, not just for my soul, but for me. I hugged her, promising to call, to visit, to keep her in my life. The bus ride back to Brooklyn was a blur of fields and regrets. When I walked into our apartment, Javier was there, waiting, his arms open. I collapsed into him, sobbing, the weight of the past weeks pouring out. "You're home," he whispered, and it was true. Home wasn't just the apartment, it was him. Us. The life we'd chosen. But Ezekiel wasn't done. A month later, I got a call from Clara. He'd convinced some church members to shun my mother unless she denounced me. She refused, her voice weak but defiant over the phone. "You're my son," she said. "I love you." It was the first time she'd said it without a caveat, without a prayer for my soul. I cried, not from pain, but from relief. Javier and I started building a new routine: therapy, community groups, nights where we'd talk about everything but Ohio. We went to Pride that year, my first time, and as we marched under a sea of rainbows, I felt free, truly free, for the first time. My mother called me afterward, her voice shaky but warm. "I saw pictures," she said. "You looked happy." I was. Ezekiel faded into the background, his influence waning as my mother's health improved. She started asking about Javier. Small questions at first, then bigger ones. When she visited Brooklyn 6 months later, she met him. It was awkward, tense, but she hugged him, her eyes wet. "Take care of my boy," she said. Javier grinned, promising he would. That night in my apartment, when Ezekiel had barged in, still haunts minute because of his words, but because it was the catalyst for everything that followed. It forced me to face my fears, to choose love over shame, to build a family that accepted me as I am. Javier and I are planning a future now, maybe a house, maybe a dog, definitely each other. My mother's still learning, but she's trying, and that's enough. In the end, love didn't just survive, I thrived, proving that even the darkest nights can lead to brighter days.